Another lie and fallacy that the white media tries to put forward about Dr. King is that he had some sort of rivalry going with Malcolm X. They didn't have a rivalry at all. They simply had minor tactical differences over what were the exact same goals, and that was to get us the tangibles that we need. Malcolm said that land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality, and that there can be no freedom without owning land. Dr. King, as you saw, said that we're owed money, and we're coming to get our check. Both Martin and Malcolm demanded not only an end to the physical violence black people have been subjected to, but also an end to the economic violence that has been inflicted on us nonstop. They both understood and expressed the rock-bottom truth that this country hates us because we are black, but it is only able to abuse and oppress us because we are poor. And this nation's top priority is to guarantee and ensure that black people remain in the exact same resource-poor, deprived state in which we were brought to this country. And in one of the most sickening demonstrations of what Dr. John Henrik Clarke called the evil genius of Europe, you have had the white media who has manufactured a phony version of Dr. King, one that they could try to use to mislead us and get us to sign on to and to, in our own minds, embrace and deify all sorts of concepts that Dr. King didn't stand for, concepts that were meant to help make sure that white supremacy wasn't threatened. When Dr. King was alive, especially in those early years, the white media cast aspersions on him. And they had absolutely nothing critical to say about some of these boneheaded preachers who called themselves criticizing Dr. King. But these black mouthpieces, particularly these black so-called preachers who are attacking Dr. King, this was a smear campaign coordinated by and carried out against Dr. King by the government. One of the biggest and loudest detractors against Dr. King was a mulatto pulpit pimp calling himself Elder Lightfoot Solomon Michaud. These pork-chop preachers really love their highfalutin titles now, don't they? Now, Michaud started his little preacher man hustle in the 1920s with a radio show which, according to the New York Times, was met with national acclaim. Now, that's your first clue he's dirty. And then 20 years after that, he becomes the first minister with a weekly TV show. So basically, he was the Creflo Dollar of his day. Let's be clear here. The government gave this guy a platform. And neither the regulatory agencies nor the IRS nor anyone else tried to shut him down. Now, don't you think that's just a little bit strange? This guy was coming up at a time when they were lynching black people in the streets. Race riots were rampant across the country, and this guy was being allowed to have a radio show and then a TV show, and apparently the same racists who were murdering black people and committing localized genocides weren't worried about him at all, and neither was the government. But of course, there was good reason for that. Elder Michaud was an FBI agent, or as they called him, a special correspondent. Then, as now, the white supremacists in the government knew how it would look if they were the ones to attack King, especially if they were the ones who tried to come out against him first. So they needed a black stooge to be their stalking horse and to break the ice. Then they would follow behind him. So the FBI would feed Michaud talking points, that King was a communist, etc., and Michaud would repeat those talking points on his show to his audience, but of course he'd make sure to leave out the part about how the FBI handed him these things to say. But the FBI's coordination with their stooge Michaud went beyond that. Michaud even organized a so-called protest against Dr. King, where he had about 120 or so handkerchief-headed Negroes who had called themselves protesting the communist king. And of course, you would then have the FBI show up, followed with the white media closely in tow, and they would say, why, we've got to question this king guy. We've been hearing some serious stuff. We're just following up on what our boy Michaud over here has said. He's very well known and well respected in the Negro community, and his accusations are very serious, blah, blah, blah. That's what they were doing. And the reason why is Dr. King's moral authority was unassailable. Dr. King had successfully framed the civil rights struggle as being a moral struggle, and the white government has been trying to destroy King's moral legitimacy ever since. This is where we get FBI-generated lies like the biggest one of all, that King was some sort of adulterer, that he ever cheated on his wife. Dr. King's power came from the fact that everyone recognized him to be a moral man. And since the white government could not deny or disprove his accusations, they instead invented lies out of whole cloth. And all the lies had the exact same through line. Dr. King wasn't a moral man. And it was bootlicking traitors like Michaud who helped to push those lies. This is part of the phony Dr. King that the white media invented. So whenever you see the white media or some fool on the street trying to claim that there were black people who said this or that about Dr. King, just remember Elder Michaud. Most, if not all, the attacks on Dr. King during his life, and certainly after his death, came from the government. And the people they try to point to as telling these lies, these were paid informants. And before you let anyone tell you that they heard one or two people in the movement who were making accusations about King, just remember, the Black Panthers were infested with FBI informants. So you truly believe that SNCC and the SCLC were not targets of massive FBI infiltration as well? Isn't it strange how so many of those people who were marching with Dr. King managed to survive and they weren't the ones who got assassinated? And a lot of them went on to have high and well-paid positions in government and in the media. Yeah, I'm talking about Andy Young and Messy Jesse. And just so you know, there's still a lot of black folks even to this day who have fond memories of Elder Michaud and still hold him in high